In the shadow of war, for women rise from obscurity, defying expectations and risking everything. A sniper's deadly aim, a pilot's daring flights, a partisan's silent sabotage, and a doctor's relentless care. Their stories, long suppressed, now emerge. As the tide of battle turns, a shocking discovery threatens to erase their sacrifices. With time running out, they must fight not just the enemy, but history itself. Will their courage be remembered or lost forever?
On June 22nd, 1941, the calm of a summer morning was shattered by the roar of German planes and the thunder of artillery. Operation Barbarossa had begun, catching the Soviet Union off guard. In Moscow, the news spread like wildfire. Ludmila, visiting the capital for a shooting competition, felt her world shift. The streets, once filled with the chatter of daily life, now echoed with urgent announcements and the hurried footsteps of citizens, rushing to prepare for the impending storm. Across the city, Valentina Grizodubova's hospital burst into frantic activity. As an experienced pilot and now a medical professional, she found herself torn between two callings. The influx of wounded soldiers from the western borders was just beginning, a grim harbinger of what was to come. Valentina's hands worked tirelessly, tending to the injured, while her mind raced with thoughts of how she could contribute more directly to the war effort. In Leningrad, Yekaterina's factory floor transformed overnight. The production of civilian goods ceased, replaced by the urgent manufacture of military equipment. The acrid smell of metal and oil filled the air as Yekaterina and her co-workers toiled, their faces set with grim determination. But for Yekaterina, this wasn't enough. The sky called to her, and rumors of a women's aviation regiment being formed ignited a fire in her heart. Meanwhile, deep in the forests of Belarus, Zoya listened intently to the crackling radio. The news of the invasion steeled her resolve. At just 18, she felt the weight of her country's fate on her shoulders. The partisan movement was gathering strength, and Zoya knew her place was there, in the shadows, fighting to undermine the German advance. As she looked at her fellow resistance fighters, she saw the same mixture of fear and determination mirrored in their eyes. The military recruitment office in Moscow was a sea of men, their faces a mix of determination and apprehension. Ludmila stood out, her petite frame dwarfed by the burly soldiers around her. As she approached the desk, the recruiting officer looked up, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "The kitchen is down the hall, miss," he said dismissively. Ludmila's eyes flashed. "I'm here to enlist," she stated firmly. The officer's laughter was cut short as she produced her marksman certificates. His expression shifted from amusement to grudging respect. In Leningrad, Yekaterina faced similar skepticism. The aviation school was reluctant to accept women, despite the desperate need for pilots. "Women are too emotional for combat flying," one instructor scoffed. Yekaterina's response was to outperform her male counterparts in every test. Her determination fueled by each doubtful glance and dismissive comment. Her skill in the cockpit soon became impossible to ignore, and whispers of a women's aviation regiment gave her hope. Zoya's path was fraught with different challenges. The partisan movement was wary of accepting someone so young, especially a woman. But Zoya's knowledge of the local terrain and her unwavering commitment to the cause gradually won them over. Her first missions were simple reconnaissance tasks, but she yearned for more active involvement. Each successful return built trust, and soon she found herself entrusted with increasingly dangerous assignments. Valentina Grizodubova's experience as a pilot and her medical skills made her invaluable. Yet she too faced resistance when she proposed flying medical evacuation missions. The front lines are no place for a woman, her superiors insisted. Undeterred, Valentina compiled data on the critical need for rapid medical transport. Her persistence, combined with her impeccable flying record, finally broke through the barriers of prejudice. As she prepared for her first evacuation flight, Valentina knew she was opening doors, not just for herself, but for countless other women eager to serve. The icy wind whipped across the snowy landscape as Ludmila peered through her rifle scope. Her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air, but her hands remained steady. Weeks of intensive training had honed her skills, transforming her from a university student into a deadly sniper. As she scanned the enemy lines, Ludmila's mind flashed back to her first kill, the mixture of triumph and horror that had washed over her. Now, with several successful missions behind her, she pushed those emotions aside, focusing solely on her duty. Miles away, Yekaterina's heart raced as she climbed into the cockpit of her Po-2 biplane. The flimsy wooden aircraft, nicknamed the crop duster, seemed ill-suited for combat, but it was all the newly formed 588th Night Bomber Regiment had. As she took off into the darkness, Yekaterina felt a surge of pride. The Germans had mockingly called them Nachthissen Night Witches, but the name only strengthened their resolve. Tonight, like every night, they would prove their worth, raining destruction upon enemy positions with deadly precision. In the dense forests of Belarus, Zoya moved silently through the underbrush. Her partisan unit had received intelligence about a German supply convoy, and they were determined to disrupt it. The weight of her makeshift explosives felt heavy in her pack, a constant reminder of the danger she faced. As they neared the road, Zoya's ears strained for any sound of approaching vehicles. The fate of nearby villages, and perhaps the entire front, rested on the success of missions like these. Valentina Grizadubova's hands gripped the controls of her medical transport plane as she navigated through heavy anti-aircraft fire. In the back, wounded soldiers groaned with every jolt and turn. She had lost count of how many evacuation flights she'd flown, each one a race against time and death. As shells exploded around her, Valentina's focus remained unshakable. She knew that for the men in her care, she represented their last hope of survival. With grim determination, she pushed the aircraft to its limits, aiming for the safety of the Soviet lines. In a rare moment of respite, Ludmila found herself sharing a makeshift meal with her fellow soldiers in a bombed-out cafe in Odessa. The camaraderie that had developed among them was a stark contrast to the initial skepticism she'd faced. As they passed around stale bread and canned meat, conversations flowed freely, punctuated by bursts of laughter that seemed out of place in the war-torn setting. Ludmila noticed a stray dog lingering near their group, its eyes hopeful. Without hesitation, she tossed it a piece of her ration, earning a grateful wag of its tail. Yekaterina's squadron had just returned from a grueling patrol over Moscow. As they debriefed in a hangar on the outskirts of the city, the bonds forged in the sky became evident. Male and female pilots alike exchanged stories, their shared experiences bridging any gender divide. A senior officer approached Yekaterina, commending her recent performance. The pride in his voice was unmistakable, a far cry from the doubts he'd expressed when she first joined. As the group dispersed, Yekaterina noticed the same stray dog from earlier, somehow having found its way to the airfield. In a safe house on the edges of Minsk, Zoya met with her partisan cell. The tension in the room was palpable as they discussed their next move. Trust was a precious commodity in their line of work. Yet Zoya felt a deep connection to these men and women who risked everything for their cause. As they pored over maps and whispered plans, a soft whine drew their attention. The loyal dog had followed them, seemingly adopting their group as its own. Its presence brought a moment of lightness to their grim task. Valentina's shift at the field hospital had stretched into its 18th hour. The exhaustion was bone deep, but the bonds formed with our fellow medical staff kept her going. As dawn broke, bringing a lull in new arrivals, she stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. To her surprise, she found the stray dog curled up near the entrance, as if standing guard. Kneeling beside it, Valentina felt a wave of emotion. In this simple creature, she saw a reflection of their own resilience and loyalty, a reminder of the humanity they fought to preserve. Ludmila's reputation grew with each successful mission. Her tally of confirmed kills was becoming the talk of the regiment, earning her grudging respect from even the most skeptical male soldiers. During a particularly tense standoff, she found herself paired with a seasoned captain for a high-stakes operation. As they lay in wait, the captain whispered, "I've heard about you. Show me what you can do." Ludmila's response came not in words, but in the precise shot that neutralized their target, securing a strategic advantage for their unit. In the skies above Moscow, Yekaterina's skill as a pilot was put to the ultimate test. During a routine patrol, her squadron encountered a group of German fighters. In the chaotic dogfight that ensued, Yekaterina's quick thinking and daring maneuvers not only kept her alive, but also resulted in her first confirmed kill. As she landed, her male counterparts crowded around, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. Her commander approached, a rare smile on his face. "Yekaterina, you've earned your wings today," he said, handing her a commendation. Zoya's work in the partisan movement was less visible, but no less crucial. Her ability to blend in and gather intelligence had saved countless lives and disrupted numerous enemy operations. During a particularly risky mission to sabotage a German supply line, Zoya's quick thinking and courage prevented the capture of her entire cell. As they regrouped in their safe house, the cell leader looked at her with newfound respect. "You've got the heart of a lion, Zoya," he said, nodding approvingly. At the field hospital, Valentina's dual expertise as a pilot and medical professional proved invaluable. During a sudden influx of critically wounded soldiers, she organized an impromptu air evacuation, piloting the plane herself. Her ability to remain calm under pressure and make split-second decisions saved dozens of lives that day. As she returned from the successful mission, she found the hospital staff lined up to greet her, applauding spontaneously. The chief surgeon approached her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Grisa Dubova, you're a godsend," he said, squeezing her shoulder. A chill autumn wind swept through Moscow as Ludmila, now a decorated sniper, arrived at military headquarters. She had been summoned, along with other notable women serving on various fronts, for a meeting that would change the course of their war efforts. As they gathered in a dimly lit room, tension hung in the air. A high-ranking official cleared his throat, his face grave. "Comrades," he began, "we've uncovered something disturbing. Reports of your achievements have been systematically suppressed." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Yekaterina, her pilot's uniform crisp, despite the long journey from her airbase, clenched her fists in anger. Zoya, recently extracted from her partisan operations for this meeting, exchanged worried glances with Valentina. The official continued, explaining how certain elements within the military hierarchy feared the impact of widespread knowledge of women's contributions to the war effort. "But now," he said, his voice gaining strength, "we need your stories more than ever. The people need hope, and you will provide it." As the implications sank in, the women realized they faced a new battle, one for recognition and against deep-seated prejudices. Valentina, drawing on her experience as both a pilot and a doctor, spoke up. "We didn't join this fight for glory," she said, her voice steady. "We did it for our country, our people. But if our stories can inspire others, then we have a duty to share them." The others nodded in agreement, a new sense of purpose igniting in their eyes. The meeting concluded with a plan. The women would continue their roles on the front lines, but now they would also become symbols of Soviet resilience and equality. As they left the headquarters, stepping into the bustling streets of a Moscow steeled for war, each woman felt the weight of this new responsibility. They were no longer just fighting against the enemy. They were fighting for the future of women in their society. The war had brought them together, and now their united stand would help shape its course. The frigid air of the Russian winter bit through layers of clothing as Ludmila took her position on the outskirts of Sevastopol. The city, battered but not broken, stood as a symbol of Soviet resistance. Intelligence suggested a major German offensive was imminent, and Ludmila's sniper unit was tasked with disrupting enemy movements. As dawn broke, the eerie silence was shattered by the thunder of artillery. Ludmila steeled herself, her rifle an extension of her body, ready to defend the city she had come to call home. Miles away, Yekaterina's squadron scrambled to their aircraft. Reports of enemy bombers heading towards a crucial supply line had reached their base. As she climbed into her cockpit, Yekaterina felt a mix of fear and determination. The sky, usually her realm of freedom, had become a battlefield. She led her formation into the clouds, knowing that their success or failure could change the course of the ground war below. The roar of engines filled the air as they raced to intercept the threat. In the forests outside a small village, Zoya and her partisan unit prepared for their most daring operation yet. They had received word of a high-ranking German officer passing through the area, presenting a rare opportunity to strike a significant blow. As they lay in wait, camouflaged among the snow-covered trees, Zoya's heart pounded. The risks were enormous, but so were the potential gains. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the silence, and Zoya signaled her comrades. It was time. Valentina's field hospital had been pushed to its limits. A recent offensive had resulted in a flood of wounded, both soldiers and civilians. As she worked tirelessly to save lives, explosions rocked the building. The front line had shifted, bringing the fight dangerously close. Valentina made a split-second decision. "We're evacuating," she shouted over the chaos. Organizing her staff with military precision, she began the perilous task of moving patients to safety. Outside, the sky lit up with tracer fire, a grim backdrop to their desperate mission. As the dust settled over Sevastopol, Ludmila emerged from her sniper's nest, exhausted but victorious. The German offensive had been repelled, thanks in no small part to her unit's precise fire. As she made her way through the rubble-strewn streets, civilians emerged from shelters, their faces a mix of relief and gratitude. The young girl approached, offering Ludmila a piece of bread, a precious gift in these times of scarcity. The sniper knelt down, accepting the offering with a gentle smile. In that moment, the weight of her actions, the lives taken and saved, pressed heavily upon her. Yekaterina's squadron limped back to base, their aircraft bearing the scars of intense aerial combat. They had succeeded in driving off the enemy bombers, but at a cost. 2 of their pilots hadn't returned. As they touched down, the gravity of their loss mingled with the elation of victory. Yekaterina climbed out of her cockpit, her legs shaky from adrenaline and fatigue. Her commander approached, his face a mask of pride and sorrow. "You did well, Yekaterina," he said softly. "They didn't get through." Deep in the forest, Zoya and the remnants of her partisan unit regrouped. Their mission had been a success. The German officer was dead, but they had paid a heavy price. Half of their unit lay buried beneath hastily dug mounds of earth. As they tended to their wounds and shared meager rations, a somber silence fell over the group. Zoya looked at the faces around her, each etched with the harsh realities of their guerrilla warfare. They had struck a blow for their cause, but the personal cost was immeasurable. Valentina stood outside the makeshift shelter where they had relocated the hospital, watching as the last of the patients was settled. The evacuation had been successful, but barely. They had lost equipment and supplies, and the strain on her staff was evident in their haggard faces. Yet, as she surveyed the scene, a sense of accomplishment washed over her. They had saved lives in the face of overwhelming odds. A wounded soldier caught her eye and nodded in silent thanks. In that simple gesture, Valentina found the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The war's end brought a mixture of jubilation and sorrow to the streets of Moscow. Ludmila, Yekaterina, Zoya, and Valentina found themselves among the throngs celebrating victory, their uniforms adorned with hard-earned medals. As they stood in Red Square, watching the victory parade, each woman reflected on their journey. They had entered the war as outsiders, fighting not just the enemy, but prejudice within their own ranks. Now, they stood as heroes, their stories an inspiration to a generation. In the years that followed, their legacy took root in unexpected ways. Ludmila, her sniper days behind her, became a prominent historian, ensuring that the contributions of women in the war were not forgotten. Yekaterina returned to the skies, this time as a test pilot, pushing the boundaries of aviation and opening doors for women in the field. Zoya, her partisan skills translating well to peacetime, worked tirelessly in international diplomacy, building bridges where once there had been only conflict. Valentina's impact was perhaps the most far-reaching. Her experiences as a pilot and doctor led her to champion reforms in emergency medical services, revolutionizing the field across the Soviet Union. Her work saved countless lives and inspired a new generation of women to enter both medicine and aviation. As she lectured to eager students, she often spoke of her wartime experiences, emphasizing the power of determination and the importance of breaking barriers. As the years passed, their stories became legend, whispered in schoolyards and debated in academic circles. They had proven that courage knows no gender, that heroism can wear many faces. In their twilight years, when asked about their extraordinary lives, each woman would smile softly and say, "We did what needed to be done." Their legacy lived on, not just in history books, but in the changed landscape of their society, where women could dream bigger and reach higher, standing on the shoulders of those who had dared to be first.